The United States' answer to the large-scale Houthi assault on March 15th was immediate and unrelenting. In the early hours of March 16th, U.S. military command made it clear that the conflict was far from finished. Just after midnight, American forces launched another wave of coordinated strikes, this time targeting secondary installations that had been missed during the previous day's operations. But while these efforts intensified, few anticipated that the Houthi forces had reserved one final maneuver. At around 12:30 a.m. on March 16th, the crews aboard the destroyers USS Stout and USS Jason Dunham remained steady and alert, unaffected by the barrage from the prior evening. As scheduled, both warships unleashed a barrage of Tomahawk cruise missiles in a synchronized strike. The target, the Houthis' central base used to launch unmanned surface vehicles and small fast attack boats. With that facility in ruins, the rebels lost their key capability to launch seaborne threats. Although this was a significant loss for them, the U.S. offensive was only just beginning. Several hours earlier, B-1 Lancer bombers that had carried out the previous strike on Yemen had returned to base in Turkey. Once refueled, rearmed, and manned with fresh crews, the aircraft took to the skies again. At approximately 4:15 a.m., they executed another strike, releasing AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, JASSM. These missiles, capable of hitting targets over 370 kilometers away, allowed the bombers to remain well beyond the reach of any residual Houthi air defense capabilities. Those defenses, however, were in shambles. Virtually all organized Houthi air defense networks had already been decimated. The only tools remaining in their arsenal were portable systems like Soviet-era Igla launchers and improvised ZSU autocannons mounted on trucks. But without radar guidance, these outdated weapons were ineffective. Their maximum reach was roughly 8,000 feet, nowhere near the 60,000-foot altitude where the B-1s operated. The American bombers flew unchallenged. What U.S. planners couldn't have known was that the destruction of a key drone base would spark unexpected retaliation. Within 24 hours of the B-1s releasing their payloads, F-35C Lightning II fighters from the Black Knight Squadron began taking off from the deck of the USS Harry S. Truman. Shortly after sunrise, they accelerated toward the Yemeni coastline on their next assignment. Their objective was to strike two weapons depots located in the Marib Governorate. These depots were demolished in rapid succession. Not a single surface-to-air missile was fired in response, but the silence wasn't due to a lack of munitions. The Houthi fighters were preparing for a more calculated and devastating counterstrike. As midday approached, radar operators aboard the Truman Strike Group vessels noticed a familiar but far more concentrated pattern: multiple incoming air targets. Unlike the previous day's limited engagement, this time, the Houthi forces opted for a full-on saturation assault. Their intent was simple: overwhelm U.S. naval defenses with a single, focused strike. Rather than attacking the entire group, they chose to isolate one vessel, the USS Gettysburg. This cruiser was about to face the full weight of the enemy's missile inventory. As radar contacts multiplied, the Tactical Action Officer, TIO, aboard the Gettysburg quickly analyzed the situation and began organizing a defense. Despite having the powerful SPY radar, which could track up to 200 contacts simultaneously, the ship could only engage a limited number, between 12 and 18 targets at a time. And with over a dozen incoming threats identified, any lapse in attention could allow slower, low-flying drones to slip through unnoticed. A layered defense strategy had to be improvised. Recognizing the pressure, the Gettysburg's commanding officer, who also held the highest seniority among the nearby ships, assumed tactical control. He immediately instructed the Stout and Jason Dunham to engage the most distant targets using SM-2 interceptors. This move bought the Gettysburg precious time and allowed it to concentrate on defending against the closest inbound missiles. That coordination proved vital. With the Stout and Dunham targeting the farthest missile threats, the number of inbound projectiles the Gettysburg had to directly address dropped from 12 to 8. Still, 8 simultaneous missile threats were more than enough to put the ship and its crew in a highly precarious situation. With only moments to react, the Gettysburg's captain made a tactical decision that defied conventional naval doctrine. Rather than launching 2 interceptors at each target, as recommended in standard combat training, he ordered the firing of a single SM-2 missile per incoming projectile, starting with the first 6. The risks were high, but so was the urgency. The SM-2 interceptor, though, wasn't a blind gamble. It carried a proven success rate of roughly 90% against threats that weren't capable of evasive maneuvers. Each missile released a warhead packed with nearly 10,000 preformed metal fragments, engineered to obliterate any aerial object it encountered. The gamble paid off. One by one, 6 missile tracks disappeared from the radar displays as confirmed kills. That left only 2 threats inbound, and an SM-2 inventory that was quickly being exhausted. With the remaining missiles possibly needed for future attacks, the captain considered an alternative. While standard procedure calls for intercepting threats at maximum possible range, typically 50 miles out, to allow time for a follow-up shot, the captain elected to hold his fire. The Gettysburg was running low on long-range interceptors, and the fight wasn't guaranteed to end anytime soon. Instead, he looked to the ship's remaining options. The 5-inch gun on board lacked the speed and precision to deal with cruise missiles. The Close-In Weapon System, CIWS, stocked with 10,000 rounds of 20mm ammunition, was being preserved for drone threats. That left only one viable option for point defense: the RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow Missile, ESSM. The ESSM was considerably smaller than the SM-2, weighing in at 620 pounds, with just 86 pounds dedicated to its fragmentation warhead. Designed for close-in protection, its true advantage lay in speed. Using the Mark 134 solid-fuel rocket motor, it could achieve speeds approaching Mach 4. However, it had a limited burn time, around 8.5 seconds, making its effective range roughly 27 miles. Though traditionally viewed as a last resort weapon, the Gettysburg's leadership decided to employ the ESSMS offensively. As the final 2 enemy missiles breached the 27-mile radius, 2 ESSMs were launched in quick succession. For a few tense moments, the outcome hung in the balance. Then came confirmation. Both enemy threats had been neutralized approximately 10 miles from the ship. The quick decision-making and unconventional use of defensive tools had paid off once again. But this wasn't the end. Following the engagement, U.S. Central Command re-evaluated the situation. It was clear that, despite the heavy strikes, Houthi forces still retained a degree of tactical coordination. With their static command infrastructure in ruins, the rebels had adapted by turning to mobile command units. These improvised headquarters, often built into pickup trucks equipped with communication gear, were harder to find, and even harder to destroy. To address this, the U.S. Air Force introduced a precision weapon specifically designed for such evasive, low-signature targets: the GBU-53 Stormbreaker. A 250-pound guided bomb, it included only 105 pounds of explosive material, but its true innovation was located in the seeker. The Stormbreaker utilized a tri-mode seeker system for targeting. The first of these was a high-resolution imaging infrared array capable of detecting even subtle heat sources, such as a truck's exhaust plume, within a margin of 0.1 degrees. In theory, this allowed it to identify mobile vehicles in the open desert. However, Yemen's environment presented a unique challenge. With constant dust, sand, smoke, and haze clouding the skies, infrared tracking alone was unreliable. That's where the second mode, millimeter wave radar, came into play. Operating at 94 gigahertz, this radar could cut through nearly all atmospheric interference and pinpoint targets to within a foot of precision. The third component of the seeker system was semi-active laser guidance. This allowed either the launching aircraft or the bomb itself to paint the target with laser energy, homing in on it even without radar tracking during flight. This flexibility meant the Stormbreaker could adapt mid-flight based on changing battlefield conditions. Though it remains unclear exactly which seeker mode was employed during the strike, one fact is certain: the mobile command units were destroyed. The Stormbreaker bombs found their marks and erased the remaining coordination nodes the Houthis were using to direct operations in the field. The U.S. didn't stop there. Additional strikes throughout the day continued to pressure the Houthi infrastructure. Among them, a Navy P-8 Poseidon aircraft launched munitions toward suspected training camps. The message was clear: no corner of the operational theater would be safe. Yet the Houthis still had one final card to play. As the afternoon progressed, American forces aboard the Truman Strike Group resumed preparations for yet another wave of air operations. Flight crews moved efficiently, unaware that a different kind of threat was closing in on their position. It started with unusual radar signals, blips that didn't behave like conventional aircraft or incoming missiles. At first, the tracks were erratic, but they maintained velocity and trajectory. With some recalibration of the SPY radar systems, watchstanders identified the source, a swarm of drones. Unlike the earlier missile attack, this was a coordinated wave of unmanned aerial vehicles, flying low and in significant numbers, directly toward the carrier group. Rather than exhausting the escort ship's defensive missile inventory, the task force commander opted for a more resourceful approach. The order went out: scramble every available FA-18 fighter on the Truman for emergency flight operations. Within minutes, the carrier's flight deck was alive with movement. Pilots suited up, deck crews cleared the runway, and jet engines roared to life. This time, the Hornets weren't configured for strike missions. Instead, they were fully loaded for air-to-air engagement, armed with AIM-120 Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missiles, or AMRAAMs. Each FA-18 Super Hornet carried up to 10 AMRAAMs, 2 on the wingtips, 6 under the wings, and 2 mounted beneath the fuselage. These missiles, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 4 and effective ranges close to 160 kilometers, were designed to eliminate high-speed enemy fighters. But today, they would serve a different purpose. Even with their advanced avionics, engaging small UAVs at long distances wasn't easy. The AMRAAM's guidance systems were robust, but their effectiveness relied on precise target acquisition. That's where another piece of technology played a critical role: the IRS-T Block 2 system. The IRS-T Block 2, a passive sensor mounted under FA-18s, allowed pilots to detect heat signatures without radar. It could spot ballistic missiles over 200 kilometers away, cruise missiles at nearly 100 kilometers, and person-sized drones up to 148 kilometers. Each jet could track 12 targets at once. With 10 Super Hornets in the air, over 100 drones were targeted. Pilots locked on and fired AMRAAMs rapidly. One by one, UAVs were intercepted before breaching the Truman Strike Group's defenses. For 7 hours, drone waves were engaged and destroyed above the Arabian Sea. Though numbers weren't disclosed, reports suggest dozens of UAVs were taken down. The air wing's coordination prevented a potential disaster. As the final drone fell, temporary relief spread, but commanders remained cautious. The scale and complexity of the attack was unexpected. Despite sustained U.S. strikes, the Houthis had mounted a resilient, coordinated offensive. U.S. Central Command began planning the next phase. Future operations would likely target Houthi logistics, drone facilities, and ammo depots. The goal: to permanently cripple their ability to strike again. Though the threat was contained, the mission wasn't over. The U.S. wasn't retreating, it was preparing.